You have to go back for a little bit in order to move forward. I still have a little different Shall we get started? Okay, we have François Crépeau. François Crépeau is the United Nations Special Officer on Migration. Migration is Professor of International Law at McGill University in Montreal, and we are particularly pleased to host him and particularly thank all of us to host Professor Crépeau here in Venice. It's very passionate, very nice person. So, you have the floor, you have also I'm more Catholic and not practicing much. I'm pretty liberal. In my political views. I've been teaching now for Quebec at Montreal with Bill Shapers. You had Bill Shapers recently. 11 years. And then I was at the University of Montreal for 5 years. 5 years. In the old days was on the legal status. It was never published because I do a doctoral thesis, we prepared for lectures like these. I defended it 6 days before the Schengen Convention was signed, which was a change in paradigm which I hadn't seen coming. So it was obsolete 6 days after it was defended. I hadn't seen it coming because it was kept very secret. They had been leaked by the Dutch Parliament the year before, but in 1990, when the convention was signed, it was announced and it was made public the same day, and no one had any idea it had been negotiated in the way that. So, if you want to do a document, try to like be defended 6 days before and not 6 days after. On European border management and the human rights of migrants and how that intersects with border management, but more generally the issue of globalization as a paradigm perspective. As was said, I've been appointed Special Rapporteur on the Human Rights of Migrants. In I have been teaching international law for 13 years. 14 learning experience for me. I've been on the learning curve ever since. I'm finishing now a sabbatical year, which issues. For a focus on migration. And so this is where I come from. I'll stop there and we'll delve into the issue immediately. So it's a general presentation, but if you're in detail on many issues, okay? And I wish that and I call that between myths and crises, because I think that migration policy is actually mixed. In great part. But we are probably a special, so maybe with the wrong technology. The science that you have in Arizona next to the American border. Um, that is that's counterintuitive. we, uh, um, this is the story. Civilization was known for um, hundreds or first crossed from the room. We all have Neanderthal DNA, 2 to 4% Neanderthal DNA in our genetic material. And then we reached, we came to Europe 40,000 years ago. It was covered the last 14 to 20,000 years ago. And reached the other way going to do a little exercise I often do. Who, and I'm not talking about Venice, who in this room lived of your four grandparents? And one person. Recent, 5%. The city. So city to city language, there can be a difference of geography. You know, city to city immigration within 2 generations. And I'm pretty sure, and and grandchildren, but that's thinking a bit far. And certainly, there are countries of children of your birth years ago, so 1,000 years. It's a good idea to ask the people in the surrounding villages to come for DNA testing, voluntary DNA testing. And there was this Shakespearean moment of a villager of this German holding the skull of his direct ancestor. I mean, this family hadn't moved from within 20 kilometers for 3,000 years. So, but generally, role models. It's how we cope with all the challenges of life. It's how we cope with economic challenges, political challenges, environmental challenges. Not counting Vanderlust. I mean, we are a curious species. We want to know what's behind the river, what's behind the mountain, what's behind the forest. And we've always done that. Some of us don't like it, some of us like it, but humanity as a whole has evolved also. You're here. You move for studies. We move for jobs. We move for pilgrimages. We move just because we want to go something else. We move holidays. I mean, internships. We move all the time. We can't stay in place. We get bored if we stay. So, what I'm saying is that migration is the rule. It's settlement that is the exception. And this is completely And it's difficult to understand because we have become accustomed to an exile after Hitler came to power, and Austria was left in 37. Muster the energy and the courage. I think that is something that that's something that political internal are going. We move as human beings. Migration can't be stopped. It can't be stopped because there are push factors, there are pull factors, development in democracy or stability, political stability, and then we will do it place, but it's not going to work on the global scale. And that's something that somehow politicians are unable to talk about. And okay. The second thing, many people rights are equated war in both cases they will have their rights recognized. It's not true. Mark who said we migrants don't, I as a Canadian, I don't have the right to enter Italy. That relates more to military service. Is, first of all, it's been for a long time, you couldn't have two nationalities if both countries have professional armies. This doesn't exist. Doesn't have to choose where they work. military service. Neither other countries that has military service. But you can be Swiss and French because there's no conflict with military service anymore. Citizenship on the territory. That's what that means. It's not on the territory, but within the jurisdiction of the state. And that's, for example, the case on as well. That's what on how you most people will say, well, no, they don't have rights. Same rights as we do. What's citizenship for? Health, right to education, and then there's has to be okay. To see what it to the right between 30 years ago in different countries, and it's going to expand and expand and expand. Now, in many countries, at a stage where we live in societies that are paying for equivalent jobs, not say through these distinctions, and check whether there's discrimination. And you have several including Canada, based on the salary of equivalent job. Now, if we do it for women, we do it and we have to do it for migrants. Why should the migrant place this is something which is legal. We have a fundamental right to be a foreigner not be allowed to be an employee at the counter at the post office. Many people that's okay, deliver letters, sell stamps. What's the problem? Kind of being employed in the Secret Service. We're wrong. Distinctions are the same for many governments resent that. Many governments will say, these are foreigners. This is my sovereignty. Persons with disabilities to hierarchized. We have in domestic law hierarchized them most in Europe. The European Convention of Human Rights, the European Charter of Human Rights, the European Charter of Fundamental Rights, the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights, have been the human rights in domestic law and in regional domestic, European domestic law. In international part of sovereign responsibility, migrants, since they don't have the right to enter and stay in the country, migrants can be expelled from and the detained before expulsion to it at will. They can't do it. We're not there yet. In many just one example, Greece in the all of census They decided that. Now, they couldn't because they didn't have detention facilities to host them anyway. But they decided that. And no one in Europe protested the law. They should have justified an individual case of detention. That's how it should be done for every to do it because the political situation is becoming impossible. PCIe is making inroads because there was this political situation. So is not yet there, but in the U.S. Supreme Court decision.
Yeah.
About no perception. So the fight is this is the kind of reasoning we can apply. That's not what politicians do. But this is why we have legal concepts. This is why we have expert courts, independent courts, who analyze these issues and can after a long expert, boring debate. We'll see why there's a limitation on the issue of market. release much less. Is today, it still continue to listen to the class. It's precisely the kind of reasoning that I'm talking about. Yeah. International human rights law provides for public order, public health, public morals, etc. It also provides for exceptions to rights due to war, unrest, etc. So you're within the, so the international the basic dignity of human rights, basic fundamental human rights. I'm not talking about government services here. Government services can be distinct, but their dignity is the same as ours. And one of the key features of the rights movement is it right? And we found that we 8 years ago in Germany, these are collective tags. And until recently, lost their nationality when they got married to someone with. What the human rights movement has changed is that we can't accept that. Average dry, really, she's not good. Well, and Robert is going to say that women shouldn't be in politics. In many countries, not all countries, because some of stereotypes about you can't make generalizations. And solutions. You can't dictate in all markets. You know, detention is based on grounds. The judge has evidence that the two are a real possibility. And there you have different rights. The Greek authority It's not that. They just said, you have to individualize decisions when human rights are at stake. Yes. This that we're not. So that's why bracelets, things like that. You want to use to decide that available $100. I'm going to come back because I don't have that money. We probably need to look at that as 400 minutes. No, it's we have the solution to the individual. And so that's one of the big lessons. But we haven't done that activity yet. It's not funny anymore. But it's still to say that the Muslims can be terrorists. Yes.
Some sort of justified because there is possible danger, then how can it be justified when there are like less intrusive measures, like electronic bracelets or?
Well, it depends what you decide. If you say the person is a danger to the community, the electronic bracelet is not going to change that. So you have to say detention is a good reason, good answer to the danger. Well, then guarantors keep on fail. Electronic bracelets could be the best solution because you are going to be able to track a person, or you're going to be able to someone's going to be there for you're going to set up a track. So
Maybe in many states, I mean, alternatives to detention exist, but in practice they are not applied. So if they're not like it's like
I mean, you have in criminal law, you have all in many countries which have a sophisticated criminal system, you have a series of alternative measures to detention, alternatives to bond, bail, etc., etc. But detention should be the last resort. Why? Because there's a presumption of freedom. Because we have a right, physical freedom, and if the state wants to justify detention, they have to justify that not only it's the right, but it's the intrusive thing to do as compared to the problem that we pose. So this is why you have all alternatives. Many countries don't have that many alternatives. But I'll come back to migration detention, which is not and but you have alternatives to detention. You have to use them. And alternatives to detention. And bail, sureties, guarantors don't cost much. bracelets, you have to buy them somewhere. Probably in America, you have to buy them dollars. Many countries don't have money for them. But say, I'll make sure he can buy. Everyone can. Everyone can. And they might say, well, you're not going to do that. You're part of the problem. And that's for the judge to decide. But if the judge believes in the individual and says, okay, you're a good citizen, I don't see any problem. If you say that you're going to bring back the person, we'll believe you. Or $100,000. People usually will come back to get the $100,000. Yeah.
Application is the first step, and then you have to justify why you must know.
That's the problem.
And this is like a magician, something like a witch, like a previous.
But that's where in many countries the situation evolve. And what we have to reach is this common understanding. We're not there yet, but we're not there yet for good enough. I mean, even after 60 years of the movement, or 150 years of suffragettes, so it's not going to be solved tomorrow. It's going to take time, and I'm going to explain why. If you have more questions, just go for it. Otherwise, I move on. Irregular migration is not a things like telling from the first day of my mandate, they don't listen much. Irregular migration is not. There's an administrative want to enter a country, you have to go through a checkpoint, a border post. That's an administrative law rule. If you don't do that, you go an administrative law. It's not a crime. It's not a crime against persons. No one is different. I'm talking about it's not a crime. So, and it's not a crime against security. We all know that 99.9% of irregular migrants who cross border irregularly are not security risks. That's what the government is saying. They're not. So there's a violation of the law. Yeah. But it is, driving the bus and driving dangerously. That's against the law. That's not a crime. Driving, even the bus, But it's the same, with action. And politicians, we'll see why. Politicians still present that as the violation of territorial sovereignty, one of the worst crimes. We had a very who was very good at making statements. All these people are criminals. Sovereignty, and we're going to go after them, and we're going to be tough. But that's the kind of statements we hear. It's not about no one first. Crossing the border is crossing the sand. Yes, if you listen to the public discourse about irregular migration, all is about crimes being committed. It's criminalized. They're presented, those migrants are presented as illegal aliens. is often used in the US. Illegal migrants. It's true that they have done something against the law. But would you say you're an illegal driver if you forgot your driver's license at home? We wouldn't use that language. The language that's used connotes something. It's not usual. The words you use in the debate. That's why politicians have been using the word illegal. That's why politicians have been using the word, for example, in the US, to create a conceptual framework for presenting the issue. You have this very interesting distinction between the European Council and the Commission in Brussels. The European Council always illegal migrants as its terminology. The European Commission always uses irregular migrants. So for quite some time, every time there was a text that was negotiated, the Council would write illegal migrants and send it to the Commission. The Commission would strike illegal About, I think, 4 years ago, where the Commission decided this was useless. It was, lost time and energy. So they accepted illegal migrants for the documents that were associated with the Council. For their own documents, they continued to use irregular migrants. But I think this shows you, and you can see the difference. The Council is again as the terminology. Why? Because that's what states reject as a conceptual framework. The Commission has a different tone on these issues and uses irregular because it has its own validation, has other operations in mind, and we can talk about them. But just to show you that the choice of words matters. Words matter. And it's not neutral. It's and the media know that, if you are the top of the tree, are the words that are going to be remembered. And things like pressing the right buttons. So words matter. This criminalization of immigration in the schools. You have this civilization process, which is interesting. Yes?
Yes, I mean, this might be too much for me. When you talk immigration and you say, well, I understand what you said about it, about not having a driver's license versus driving dangerously. But there's also the concept of intent, which is embedded in criminal law. And there's a difference between saying, I forgot my license, I intentionally did not have my license, I errantly crossed the line of the sand, which might be a difficult concept in this context, or intentionally snuck into the country. I mean, there's that sort of thing which pushes it further, at least in the political discourse or in the layman's terms, something that looks criminal, perhaps.
I mean, that's why the image sticks with the population. When in fact, that's defined crimes are crime. Crimes are crime against first against property or against this is what crimes are. Someone has to be hurt. No one is hurt. The law. And there should be and you drive probably very well. Many kids were driving, well before having their driver's license. And not all. They knew they had a license, but they count on the fact that they rarely encountered policemen, and that's what they were doing that. and there should be a penalty for that. And I'm not saying it doesn't matter, board managers, it should be respected, but we have to understand why, and that's where they don't come. We have to understand why these people come and why they cross the border section. The crossing of the border itself is it is a violation of the law. There should be a penalty, fine thing. It should, but it's not a big thing. It's made into a big thing. It's created into a big thing. And that's why I want to talk about the stigmatization process. And just to continue on that vein, because that explains a bit. In the 50s and 60s in France, the immigration from North Africa was irregular. But you arrived in France, there was no difficulty in getting visa. The visa requirement. So you could cross the Mediterranean easily, but you didn't have the right to look for work. But that's what you did on arrival. And you found a job at Renault or Peugeot or whatever. And you got a job, and then you went to the prefecture, job offer, work contract, and the prefecture recognized you. The millions of migrants came to France in the 50s and 60s were irregulars, who were regularized. And some cars are perfect. Now, there was no issue, there was no problem. And Spain to the irregular 100,000 migrants. There's a little problem nowadays with that in Spain. But there's no catastrophe that happens. It's not, there's not a side. And that's why the stigmatization process is interesting. I've come across that international association. And look, the ISA meeting is a huge thing. Mostly for political scientists, political sociologists, and I noticed that at the time, that was almost 20 years ago, there was a competition. And I was reading the literature, because I didn't know I'm a lawyer. So I started reading a bit about that, and I noticed that for these people, these scientists working in state, the process of stigmatization is going to happen naturally. And in very short, the oil price in the 70s, etc., has lost in part because of open the borders competition on everything. To regain this legitimacy, they fell back on the traditional function of the state. So now we have used industrial policies, agricultural policies, not that anymore because we are in a in order to immigration security. It's not an agricultural anymore, it's a security policy. And you know, resource security. We have, you know, mining, all these issues have been securitized in the discourse in order to keep the literature, which is an interesting, and I'm not a recessionist about literature, I'm just telling you that that's a concept framework that I explained in part why migration had been securitized all at the same time. It wasn't. It was a Ministry of Labor, a Ministry of Social Affairs. And then in the 90s, it moved to Home Affairs. So there is, it seems, the work, protection process in general, but which applies also to migration policy. We talk about migration security. And you can see we have how this charge of immigration have to develop immigration intelligence services. You know, their own little spying agencies. It's a while in order to gather information about spying operations and trafficking operations. And they have created their own little intelligence, because the big intelligence agencies are not interested in immigration. This was social affairs, this was labor. Why do you bother me with, you know, stuff, emails and stuff? I'm looking about Russian spies. That's important. They were not interested. And suddenly these little immigration services, like immigration parts of their departments, became part of the security intelligence mechanisms. One good example, one good anecdote is that a good movie made in Canada in 2000 about a smuggling operation from Colombo to Toronto. And they interviewed immigration intelligence people who accepted to be interviewed and to tell. They had received information from contacts in Beijing through an Australian called Toronto. If you try to contact immigration intelligence today, no one will talk about Carol. In 2004, you know, they seriously about real specialists in intelligence. And so participating in like this, showing that they mattered, but they was important. I have the need to. And suddenly now you can't. I think it's an interesting organization process has also affected immigration and part immigration. Now, it's interesting because this process based on the secret it's always talked in terms of the language doesn't translate. The law applies to markets is very rarely criminal. Why? Because there are rules and rules of procedure that constrain the state, which immigration law is supposed to be administered. But using administrative law. In criminal law, you have to prove guilt. You have to prove all of that probability. And so, states are not interested in criminal the administrative framework. And it's an interesting contrast to see how the legal framework and And there is criminality, there are some coming and but that's, a small activities. This is concerned environment, the framework of the and that brings all sorts of flaws. Think about this. The guarantees of defense developed in criminal law over centuries. Law in the land. Often that could get you beheaded, that could get you tortured for a long time. Nowadays, in countries, and detention should be controlled one way or another. Not always well, but this doesn't exist in the ministry. In my country, the most dangerous problem today is the ministry of law. The only judge who can send people to torture and arbitrary detention is the immigration. And yet, the law has not yet evolved the guarantees that are needed for that. And that's an interesting concept. That's something we don't have our generation. There's some the new law has to follow. Starting to do this. Look at the consequences. We've had some decisions by the European Court, for example, that people were terminally ill, etc., etc. These are about consequences, not simply about whether the law has been applied. And that's exactly what the law did for these centuries, evolved guarantees. The administrative law has to do that. I think judges are starting to understand that. It's a great motivation. Yeah, right.
Just saying that criminalization is mainly discourse, but for example, the US, isn't it true that in recent years there's a huge surge in criminal for a while, around and the presence was criminalized, it was going on.
These are exceptions. Generally, you have cases. Mostly related to Arizona, Alabama, etc. These, and you have there on top of it, you have their state legislation versus federal legislation, which are conflicting, and you have big Arizona legislators want to do and what the federal government wants them to do. And the judges of those criminalization schemes, like Arizona Alabama laws, have been at least constitutional by judges, saying that it's in federal administrative law. But I agree, there's the tendency to criminalize. There's certainly the discourse of almost everyone in the political field. Some try to go a criminal way. But it might provide a good message. I tempted going into that direction. In most countries, it's much easier where you came, you easily convince the judge, more easily convince the judge, that there's a 50-50 chance that the guy will have spawned. Much easier than so that's where I say that there is the appetite for criminal law mechanisms, but there is no criminal law. So there's that tango. Yes. Yeah.
Came up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and I think they said that the federal government has.
The decision was a bit split. They decided that some parts of the law were against the Constitution, but some others, the asking for papers, immigration papers when you stop the car, so they can do it. It's a bad idea, and I'll come to that. It's a bad idea. One thing that is that states of destination for irregular migration flows. That's acknowledging that and compare, for example, to what happened, very easy for for example. Push or political problems and environments. And you have a destination state where migrants want to go. There's very little immigration into irregular migration. There's very little immigration, irregular immigration into migrants go where they go where they know how to go. Country in the global north, after there are jobs for irregular migrants. It's not true for Greece in US. It's true. There are jobs for irregular migrants. Irregular migrants don't have security. They eat in the evening.